What's up everybody, Gen X Dividend Investor here. In this video I show you an easy way to have an all-weather portfolio that enables both growth and income using only 2 dividend ETFs. I'll end things telling you about something new that I just started trying out, so stay tuned for that. And the reason I'm doing this video is because of a comment I recently got where a subscriber asked me what my favorite dividend ETFs were to build a long-term portfolio, and he asked if I thought SCHD and DGRO were enough. Another reason I'm doing this is because my channel members and upper tier Patreons voted on what video I should do next, and this one ended up winning. I first want to show you this article on Seeking Alpha, published in 2015, called How Much Extra Return Are You Getting If You Reinvest Dividends by David Van Knapp. He included a graph of S&P 500 returns using the ETF SPY from 2013 to 2014, and specifically shows both stock price return and total return, which includes reinvested dividends. And I wouldn't be surprised if this makes you feel like dividends look kinda useless. I mean, the two lines are pretty close to one another, and in fact, reinvesting SPY's dividends over this short time frame only makes about a 6% difference in total returns as compared to price alone, which might not seem that compelling. SPY's yield was only around 1.8% of the time, so what would you expect? But he found that if you lengthen the time period of reinvesting out to 10 years for SPY, then the dividend impact becomes much more profound. He showed that for the 10 years ending in 2014, SPY's returns with dividends reinvested were 38% more than SPY's price change alone, which is a ton. And I wouldn't fault you if you'd guessed that a 1.8% yield over 10 years should be like an 18% additional return, but the mistake you'd be making is not factoring in compounding growth, which leads to over double that amount. Thus, some takeaways from that article are that number 1, most people only talk about stock price returns like they do on TV or wherever, and yet a lot of your return over time will come from your reinvested dividends. Number 2, the impact of dividends tends to grow more the longer the period of time you're looking at. And number 3, the author was surprised that when he reviewed his dividend growth portfolio, that its income had increased 15% in 2014 over 2013, even though not a single stock in his portfolio had increased its dividend that much. So how could that happen? Had he made a math error? No, it turns out that the big increase came merely as a result of reinvesting his dividends. He had reinvested about $3,000 in the previous year, or about 4% of his portfolio's value. That allowed him to buy 4% more stocks, so all else being equal, his dividends should only have added 4% more income. But what happened was that the new income was on top of the income that his portfolio already generated. That's why his portfolio as a whole had a cash flow increase larger than the increase from any single component. And all that should help you understand the spreadsheet data I put together of dividend ETFs, which includes many popular ones. I've sorted this list based on total returns, including reinvested dividends. I'll first quickly go over each column heading, and then I'll dive into each ticker. So I start with the ticker, its name, then its current dividend yield. Then I listed its 5-year dividend CAGR per Seeking Alpha, then its years of dividend growth, and then how much income it would generate at year 7, assuming we had originally invested $10,000. I chose year 7 because one of the tickers had only been around for 8 years, and some haven't paid their December dividends yet. This approach helps make the comparison more consistent and apples to apples. Okay, next I have expense ratio, then when the ticker came into existence, then I list its 10-year annualized return per portfolio visualizer, more or less if it's been around for less than 10 years, then I list its 8-year price appreciation returns on Seeking Alpha, then its 8-year total returns, which includes dividends reinvested, then the number of stocks in the ETF, then its assets under management, and then its daily average trading volume. Part of the way I picked this list was based on which tickers had the most assets under management, as that's essentially how much money people have collectively invested in an ETF, which speaks to its popularity. I also aimed to avoid including ETFs that were too similar, and I excluded those less than 8 years old because I wanted a minimum of 8 years of historical data. And the first ticker I included was VTI, the Vanguard Total Stock Market Index Fund ETF, which contains thousands of public companies in the US. You might be surprised to see VTI in a list like this, but the fact is that it does pay dividend distributions and it's an ETF, and I just showed you that article about how even low-yielding ETFs can deliver substantial income if they keep growing over a long period of time. Next I included VIG, the Vanguard Dividend Appreciation Index Fund, which includes hundreds of US companies that have consistently increased their dividends for at least 10 consecutive years, excluding REITs and high yielders. Then I have DGRO, the iShares Core Dividend Growth ETF, which includes hundreds of US companies with at least 5 consecutive years of dividend increases that have payout ratios under 75%, and it excludes the top 10% of yielders. Next is one I own in SCHD, aka the Schwab US Dividend Equity ETF, which has about 100 US stocks, excluding REITs, that have 10 consecutive years of dividend payments, along with a float-adjusted market cap of at least $500 million, a minimum trading value amount, and which have a good cash flow to total debt, return on equity, dividend yield, and 5-year dividend CAGRs. Speaking of SCHD, they just announced their 4th quarter dividend, and that means their 2024 payout was 12.2% higher than their 2023 payout, factoring in their 3-for-1 split. That's pretty darn awesome, though based on some things I've read about SCHD recently, it makes me think that I should do a video about common mistakes I see people making about it. Leave me a comment if you'd like me to do that. Okay, and after SCHD, I included Devo, another I'm long in, and it is Amplify's Enhanced Dividend Income ETF, which holds 20 to 25 dividend stocks, and is an actively managed covered call income ETF. Some people understandably shy away from ETFs with a low number of stocks in them, as that can mean some tickers can be a large percentage of the portfolio, and the top ones in Devo are indeed at about 5.5%. Now, I personally don't mind that if I feel it's a quality portfolio, and I have multiple tickers that make up 5 to 7% of my portfolio. It really comes down to what companies are being held and my confidence level in them, and I tend to like what Devo holds along with I like their management. Note that income ETFs often pay out a lot of their income as ordinary, and then some distributions might be qualified, more capital gains, more return of capital, or whatever. After Devo, I included Noble, the ProShares SP 500 Dividend Aristocrats ETF, which includes the 60+ companies in the SP 500 that have increased their dividend for at least 25 consecutive years. Then I included another well-known Vanguard ticker in VYM, the High Dividend Yield Index Fund ETF, which includes over 500 US stocks with the highest dividend yields, excluding REITs. And finally, I included DVY, the iShares Select Dividend ETF, which holds about 100 US stocks. Now, there are obviously tons of other dividend ETFs I could include, but I felt these ones were pretty decent to review for a variety of reasons, so before you ever decide to invest in something, make sure you do a more rigorous analysis of what's out there. And remember, just because something performed a certain way in the past doesn't mean it'll do so in the future. Okay, so as you'd probably expect, we see that VTI has had the most total returns of all the tickers. Yes, every so often some ticker will come along and beat the US market for at least a period of time, but historically the US market has been pretty darn strong. And I could have used VU or SPY for the spreadsheet rather than VTI, but generally what happens is that sometimes VTI pulls ahead over periods of time and then sometimes VU does, so any of those types of tickers are all solid. I don't personally hold VU or VTI in my portfolio, but if my portfolio were significantly larger, it would be great to rely solely on the dividends from a broad market ETF without needing to sell shares. That being said, I'd still enjoy dabbling in a few individual stocks because I find owning them fulfilling. I love the pride and ownership I feel when I see a McDonald's or a Starbucks, or when I use my iPhone or play on my Xbox or whatever. So whether you own single stocks or ETFs or whatever, the most important point is to actually start and then stick with it for the rest of your life. Take a listen to this 50-second clip to understand my perspective a bit more.
To be successful at anything, the truth is you don't have to be special. You just have to be what most people aren't. Consistent, determined, and willing to work for it. No shortcuts. No matter who you are, there are bumps and hits and bruises along the way. Nothing in life of significance is ever accomplished alone. But understand this, happiness begins where selfishness ends.
An easy productivity hack. Instead of spending time getting in the mood to work, just start working. Confront the work. People think they need perfect conditions to start, when in reality, starting is the perfect condition.
It's grind season, homie. It's not about today, it's about the future. You do the work now.
Nice. Okay, back to the dividend ETFs. Looking at total returns over the last 8 years, we see that VTI is up top at 204%, followed by VIG at 179%, then DGRO at 170%, SCHD at 163%, Devo at 158%, Noble at 135%, VYM at 129%, and DVY at 112%. So again, VTI is in a total returns category of its own. Then we have a group of close followers in the 158 to 179 range, and then a group of laggards beneath that. Now let's sort this based on the amount of income you get at year 7. And now we see Devo is up top, coming in at $973 in a category of its own, which you'd expect for a conservative covered call ETF. Obviously there are much more aggressive income ETFs out there, but many of those were too new for me to include in this list, or they didn't have enough assets under management, or maybe I just missed them. After Devo, the next biggest income yielder is SCHD at $750 at year 7, then we drop down to DVY at $634, then VYM at $562, DGRO at $530, VIG at $425, then Noble at $423, and finally VTI at $330. If we sorted this by dividend CAGR, we see SCHD up top, followed by VIG and then DGRO. An interesting and surprising view of this data is seen if we sort things by number of consecutive years of dividend growth. Now we see VYM and SCHD up top, followed by VIG, then DGRO, and then the others fall off the chart. So what surprised me was Noble only having 1 year. I mean, it's a dividend aristocrat ETF, so I'd have guessed it would have many more consecutive years than that, even knowing that sometimes a ticker it holds will fall off the list and that could negatively impact it. So I decided to pull in Noble's underlying data into a spreadsheet to see what happened. This shows that in 2023, Noble paid out $1.99, then in 2022 it paid out $1.74, and in 2021 it paid out $1.86, so indeed it has only one consecutive year of increases. It turns out that 2022 was the year that AT&T was removed from the aristocrat list when its dividend got cut, and People's United Financial was also removed when its merger with M&T Bank Corporation was finalized, so maybe those changes caused the ETF payout hiccup. Another interesting number of consecutive years is VTI's, which is at 3 years. My guess is that the pandemic is when they lost their trend of increases, so let's double check the data. So in 2023, VTI paid out $3.41 per share. In 2022, it paid out $3.18. In 2021, $2.93. And in 2020, $2.77. But in 2019, they paid out $2.90. So yeah, it looks like the pandemic in 2020 caused a dip in their payouts as we guessed. Part of the reality of most ETFs is that they have more volatile payouts, so having more consecutive years of dividend increases becomes increasingly challenging. Okay, and as I look at this data, and I think about the original commenter's question about if I thought that SCHD and DGRO would be enough to build a long-term portfolio, well, for me personally the answer is yes. I'd also be cool with SCHD and Devo, or VIG and SCHD, or etc., depending on what I wanted to stress more in my portfolio and what worked for my tax implications. Ideally, I'd recommend most people try to focus on broad market ETFs like VTI or SPY for growth, and then decide if you also want to gas things with some income ETFs, assuming you need passive income now. And remember, there are thousands of tickers out there. Like maybe you decide to go with SCHG for growth, a stock that might be a good brother or sister to SCHD. Ultimately, you got to figure out what makes sense for you. You got to look at your risk tolerance, your time frames for returns, the types of returns you want, etc. Figure out how much diversification you want, understand how the ETFs you're looking at are managed, and realize that there will be periods of years where growth can lag or income can lag. My guess is that dividend ETFs like SCHD will hold up better in bad years, and that very few things will beat out VTI or VU, at least in terms of growth, over the long run. I personally have 28 tickers in my portfolio, with 4 of those being ETFs, including some covered call ETFs to juice my income. I really value what dividends do for my life, and what I believe they'll do for others when I'm gone. Take a look at this 15-second clip to get a flavor of what I mean.
Society grows great when old men plant trees, the shade of which they know they will never sit in. Good people do things for other people. That's it, the end.
Now, dividends benefit you now, so it's not the same thing, but to me there's an aspect I like of planting a dividend tree that others will benefit from long after I'm gone. And sure, I could always sell a bunch of my stocks in retirement and watch my principal crumble away and then materially raise my standard of living and ultimately leave little or nothing for my kids or for charity, but I love the idea of making life financially easier for those I care for. Anyway, if you don't manage your finances, odds are you'll end up way underwater. You gotta make sure you live under your budget and that you invest non-stupidly. I mean, I just saw this article where Jim Carrey said that he had to come out of retirement because he needs money. This is a guy who has earned over $300 million from his movies. But if you don't manage your spending, then bad things can happen, like it's happened to Hugh Grant, Nicolas Cage, Amanda Seyfried, and Harrison Ford, who've all said they've had to take on new movie roles due to financial concerns. In fact, in Al Pacino's recent memoir, he said he quit acting once in the 80s, but then he had to return to it because he was running out of money. He said he suddenly found his bank account was down to $90 grand after spending his Scarface and Godfather 1 and 2 and Serpico and such movie money. What's even crazier is that he didn't really learn his lesson about going broke, because after doing 2 more decades of movies, he went broke again in 2011 due to overspending again. So your takeaway from all this is to invest and live within your means. It's not rocket science, so I'm sure you can do it. Okay, now I'll switch gears and tell you about a new thing I'm trying, which is intermittent fasting, and right now I'm at 19 hours of the 22 I plan to fast for. Fasting apparently can provide a variety of health benefits, so I thought I'd give it a go. When you're at the 8 to 12 hour point from the last time you ate, then insulin levels often begin to decrease, allowing your body to shift toward burning stored fat for energy. At 12 to 16 hours of no eating, your body increasingly relies on fat stores for energy, leading to improved fat metabolism, and small amounts of ketones can be produced as an alternative energy source, providing cognitive and physical benefits. People who regularly fast to that stage can enhance how their cells respond to insulin, potentially reducing the risk of type 2 diabetes. Then at the 16 to 20 hour fasting mark, you can enter a phase where some of your damaged cells get broken down and recycled. Plus at that point, your brain can see reduced risk from some neurodegenerative diseases, and ketogenesis becomes more pronounced, helping further with weight loss and metabolic flexibility. Then at the 20 to 24 hour range, your cell repair processes become more intense, especially in immune cells, potentially supporting better immune function. You can also see greater reductions in inflammation, and your human growth hormone levels can significantly increase, aiding in muscle repair, fat metabolism, and anti-aging processes. Now, of course, you should first talk to your doctor before doing something like that, and don't push yourself too far too fast. Besides, just because some dork on YouTube is fasting doesn't mean you should. I'm just planning on doing this now and then based on how things go. And please leave me a comment if you've ever tried intermittent fasting and what your thoughts are about it. And if you made it to this part of the video, then I thank you, as that means you're one of the serious people who have patience and persistence, which itself is rare in this world. Do me a favor and hit that thumbs up button, subscribe if you haven't yet, and click that bell notification, as all of that really helps. Also, please consider becoming a channel member like these folks did by clicking on that join button below. Channel members get to watch my videos before I release them publicly, and they get to vote on which thumbnail I use, and they also get a special badge icon that is placed by their comments on my videos, which levels up over time, amongst other perks. I'll also recommend that everyone check out my Fast Graphs affiliate link along with my coupon code in the description of this video, as using both should allow new users to get 25% off their first payment even if they sign up for a full year. I'll also suggest that you try out my Seeking Alpha affiliate link, as new users can often get good discounts for signing up. Plus, take a look at my Patreon seats to see if there's any you want to sign up for. Finally, don't forget to join my free Dividend Discord chat server, which has over 11,000 dividend investors on it from 83 countries around the world. Thanks for watching, stay positive, and I'll talk to you again real soon. Remember, I'm not a financial advisor, and my videos are for entertainment and inspirational purposes only. Investing of any kind involves risk. I'm only sharing my opinions with no guarantee of gains or losses on investments.